The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
The Seahawks have been kicking the tires on veteran cornerbacks over the last couple of months. They finally have added to the group with a familiar name.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast.
They looked at Rasul Douglas. They looked at Shaquill Griffin. They were linked to Jalen Ramsey as a trade possibility. Now, Rob, we know who is going to be coming back to Seattle. Shaquill Griffin signing a one-year deal worth $3 million, could be up to $4 million with incentives. And this is the first thing that I'm going to say, and we talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago. I actually was kind of lukewarm on this happening at this point just because they had been talking to Griffin for a couple of months, and it just didn't seem like a deal was coming together. But $3 million with up to $4 million in incentives, listen, that's telling me the Seahawks think that he has a chance to be a significant player in the secondary because Josh Jobe is making a third of that. And that doesn't mean there's not going to be an open competition between those two guys. But this seems like pretty darn good money for a player who has been in the free agent market this long. We know how many games Shaquill Griffin started. He's been a Pro Bowler before, very familiar with Seattle. I just think that price point, that is an indicator to me that the Seahawks, we'll see where the guaranteed money's at. That's going to be the real story. But that is an indicator to me that John Schneider, Mike McDonald, everybody involved in these decisions believes that Shaquill Griffin can come in and play a lot of snaps as the third corner for this team.
Yeah, I think that he can. I think that the evidence has been on tape, and it has been over the last 8 seasons in which Shaquill Griffin has been a quality player in the NFL. You know, as you said, I mean, we can quote all the numbers that you want. To me, the number that stands out is 82 games started over his career. The fact that he played in all 17 games a season ago, had a couple of interceptions. Statistically, it was arguably the best season that he's had since he left Seattle in the first place. He is just under 30 years old. And so this is a guy that, you know, he has played enough. He's seen it all. He is still a very reliable, durable player. He's a good open field tackler. He is instinctive and productive against the run. He is willing to fight through blocks. He can man up against bigger, taller receivers. He still has good speed, not necessarily the elite 4.3 speed that he had at one point, but still can run with receivers. I think that this is a quality addition to the Seahawks secondary. I didn't know the financial numbers here, or at least it was been reported to this point. But Corbin, when I watched him on tape, I saw a guy that I thought absolutely should be on an NFL roster at this point. And I think the Seahawks basically just kind of were surveying the field a little bit. I do believe that they would have had some interest on Jair Alexander. I do believe that they kept close attention to what was going on with Jalen Ramsey in Miami. And all the other cornerbacks that we've talked about, Rasul Douglas or whoever. I just think that Shaquill Griffin throw out the fact that he used to be with the Seattle Seahawks and just look at him as a player. This is a guy that should be on an NFL roster. And then you add in the fact that he's a former Seahawk and is, beloved in that room. They know who he is. They know he's a quality human being, takes care of himself. So again, I think that this is a move that makes an awful lot of sense. Maybe it is going to wind up being more expensive than perhaps we would anticipate for something this late in the process. But at the same time, I also think that this is a good player and deserves, the Seahawks had a concern at this position, and to get a player of this magnitude, frankly, at this point in the offseason, I think makes an awful lot of sense.
And I don't know that this is going to be the last move that John Schneider makes, because at the end of the day, this is only going to cut a couple million off the salary cap. They've still got a lot of financial wiggle room to be able to go out and make a trade or sign another player like a Jadeveon Clowney here in the next few weeks. We'll see what they end up doing, but we know that John Schneider likes to be aggressive in this dead period. He likes to go out and continue looking for ways that he can improve his football team, and he's got a lot more financial flexibility than he's had at this point in a number of seasons. And when you look at Shaquill Griffin, we've talked about this quite a few times. When the first rumors circulated that there could be a reunion here, Shaquill Griffin, I thought, was on the verge of being out of the league a couple years ago. When he was with the Texans and the Panthers in 2023, he did not play well. His 2 years in Jacksonville, he was riddled with injuries. And when he did play, he didn't have any interceptions. The production was simply not there, and he wasn't tackling as well. He goes to Minnesota this past year, though, Rob, 41 tackles. He has 2 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, and a 76.9 passer rating against, which is the second lowest he's had as an entire career. I believe it was his second season in Seattle that he had the best, and it was very close. So the argument I'm making here is that Shaquill Griffin is being that third corner in Minnesota. He got to play quite a few snaps as that rotational nickel dime add on the outside. He even played a few snaps in the slot. You got really good production from him as a tackler. You've got a couple of interceptions, which that has been something that's been hit and miss for him. Maybe the biggest issue in his entire career is he hasn't created enough turnovers consistently, but he's gotten his hands on the football a lot, had a couple pass breakups for Minnesota. I thought it was the best season that he had since his Pro Bowl year in 2019 for the Seahawks. You can make an argument even the last year in Seattle, even though he had the interceptions, he gave up a lot of touchdowns in 2020. And that was part of the reason Seahawks were not willing to match what the Jaguars paid for him. And that ended up being a good move. But I think at $3 million, a guy that's still, he's just going to be 30 years old next month. He still can move really well. We got to see him in the game against the Seahawks last year at Lumen Field, and he got his hands on a pass. I think that this, at worst, is going to give you the best competition that you could have got your hands on without giving up a draft pick. Maybe Jalen Ramsey is a superior player, but you'd have to give something up to get him. He's more expensive. Shaquill Griffin gives you a guy that can, at minimum, he's going to be able to push Josh Jobe, who you were excited about what you saw last year. But a lot of times guys that have emergent seasons out of nowhere like that, it's really hard to replicate that the following year. So you want to have at minimum somebody that can really push him. And if Shaquill Griffin ends up beating him out, that's going to be a good thing as well, because both these guys have 1 year on their current contracts. So Griffin's got a great opportunity here to be able to get playing time in a familiar setting, in a defense that I think he's going to fit in pretty well with, because he has been a willing tackler. There has been some physicality to his game, and he's got that confidence and that swagger that I think Mike McDonald really wants out of his cornerbacks. I think it is a solid fit for him. We'll see. I'm not predicting he will. I think that they have a chance potentially for him to win that job against Josh Jobe coming up in training camp.
No, I think there's a good chance of that. I think that, as you mentioned earlier, I think that the contract suggests that the Seahawks think that there's a good chance that. Look, I'm a big fan of Josh Jobe, so I think, and frankly, I'm excited about the upside Nehemiah Pritchard has demonstrated as well. But at the same time, again, as you just said, when talking about Josh Jobe a moment ago, that sometimes you see players that play very well one season, and they duplicate that when the league has an off season to really put you on tape and really figure out your deficiencies. You see an awful lot of players that flash and then are not consistently effective in the NFL as time goes on. That's one of the reasons why, again, Shaquill Griffin is as impressive as he is. And there's a lot of good quality journeyman players. We're going to be talking about some of those players here in a few minutes when we do our top 90 breakdown. But I just think that Shaquill Griffin, again, at the price point that at least is being reported, that it made an awful lot of sense. And I mentioned before the timing of it. And I think that, it is the off season. It is the dead season, so to speak. But it's also, you have obviously another, a month basically until training camp. That an NFL team is giving a player a month to basically mentally and physically prepare themselves for the rigors of training camp. If you are a player that's at least perceived to be on the outside looking in, you need that time to kind of build your body back up. So kudos to the Seahawks. If this is the move that they wanted to make, and obviously we've been talking about this for a while now, we knew that they were kicking the tires. Kudos to make the move now, rather than risk losing this player over the next month or so. And then again, giving the player a real chance to do something rather than sign him on the eve of training camp. It gets all kinds of buzz, but it doesn't actually put the player or the team in the best position to move forward.
Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com, 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens have a chance to be one of the league's best wide receiver duos.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's start with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. On talent alone, this has a chance to be one of the best wide receiver duos. Do we think they get there?
Yeah, I think it's possible. It's certainly within the range of outcomes with these two. You definitely need, obviously the X factor here, literally and positionally, is Pickens, right? I mean, I think we've established CD has a very high floor. He's one of the top 5 receivers in football. We know he can produce even without a established wide receiver around him. I think we've seen all that we need to see from CD to know that he's a produce. The question is all on Pickens and how he kind of transitions into this team, how he plays, how he manages his own, temper and ability to kind of, focus. But I certainly think on a talent basis, these two have to be two of the best, pairings in the NFL. And I think the other part of it too is that they complement each other in such an incredible way that I think that needs to be accounted for as well.
Yeah, it's just, can Pickens be consistent? Because I think even if Pickens is just the high variance receiver that we've seen, through the first 3 years of his career, he's going to have a big impact on this team. Like, they just haven't had that X standalone receiver that they can put outside and win vertically. They just haven't had that since 2020 Michael Gallup, 2021 Michael Gallup, right? If Pickens can become more consistent on a down-to-down basis, and you can rely on him in big spots, that's how this wide receiver room really gets better. And that's how this wide receiver duo becomes one of the best in the league. Because I think on talent alone, you're right, they're there. It's just, we know CD's consistent. Can Pickens be consistent? He's the real X factor here.
Yeah, and again, like, the good news here is that even if he can't find a level of consistency that, every single game, maybe even if he's not producing, 5 catches for 100 yards, every single game, again, as long as he can be a threat to the defense and draw attention away in those situations and continue to be a viable part of the offense, that's really where you have a concern, right? Is he is valuable to the Cowboys offense, even if he isn't getting production. So they need him to continue to run routes well and continue to do what he needs to do to draw the attention of the defense. And that's where you have concerns, right? Is he going to be able to maintain that focus when he isn't being targeted quite as often as he was in Pittsburgh?
So let's talk about CeeDee Lamb really quickly, Landon, before we move on. He's already, you said top 5. I think I would argue he's closer to 3 than 5.
Yeah.
How does he take that next step from going from a, perennial Pro Bowl receiver to a, guy? I think he was a second-team All-Pro selection last year. He was an All-Pro selection in 2023. How does he get better? Or have we already seen the best version of CeeDee Lamb that we're going to see?
I think that's a really good question. I think, where does he kind of grow from here? I feel like, it's going to be in producing more big plays, because of, like I said, the attention that's being drawn away by Pickens. Not that he lacked in that at any point, or that's been a problem with him. But I just think that you're going to get more opportunities for him to create explosive plays when he's competing against lesser competition, or at least less competition, I should say, not lesser, as there's going to be the less attention on him. So it was incredibly impressive that he was able to do what he was able to do with the amount of attention the defenses were focusing on him. Now that he's got less of that attention on him, how does he take advantage of that? Does he become a more efficient receiver? Does it become take bigger chunks out of defenses when he gets the ball? I think that's what I'm most excited to see.
Yeah, and I think, it would help if Dak Prescott stayed healthy, because we know whenever those two guys are on the field together, their connection is one of the best in the league. I mean, I think the only quarterback wide receiver duo that's better in the league right now is probably Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. So I think that would help, but I just think being more consistent, even for Lamb. Last year, we saw him struggle with drops a little bit. I think PFF charted him with 12 drops, and it's not like CD has bad hands, because obviously he doesn't, but just fix some of the concentration drops, right? Like if you can clean up just little tiny parts of his game, I think he can be truly, truly dominant.
Well, that's what we'll see is that, early in the season, last season, there clearly was some sort of chemistry issues as CD had missed most of training camp because of this holdout, that sort of thing. So maybe what we see is just CD kind of getting into his rhythm of the season maybe earlier than we did last year. And he starts that level of consistency that we saw kind of show itself by week 4 in week 1, as opposed to, just having to wait for the first month, because he's already accustomed. He's been in the flow of things, no disruption because of contract.
Let's go down the depth chart a little bit. Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver 3. He's the front runner for that job. Do you expect him to take it?
I do. I think we saw a better Jalen Tolbert last year. I mean, again, just in the consequence of the kind of lost season after Dak got hurt, it's hard to kind of pull positives out of that whole situation. But I do think that one of the positives was Jalen Tolbert. I think he had took a step forward despite the fact that Dak wasn't there. He was able to produce. He put up solid numbers. He was able to, create a bunch of touchdowns. He was able to, be a reliable receiver in moments when they needed him at times. Was he up to the level of someone that you felt comfortable going in as wide receiver 2? Probably not if you had aspirations, beyond just making the playoffs. So I think that him being bumped down to wide receiver 3 is appropriate. I think the question now becomes, can he be an efficient receiver at a lower volume? And not that he was getting a high number of targets before, but sometimes it's difficult for these younger guys as they start to get into being an NFL wide receiver to take a step back and still be efficient without, getting a lot of targets. So I think that's really the question. And can he be moved around enough to kind of keep up with, the other 2 guys to put them in the positions they need to be successful. I think that's the question. And then one more thing, we talk about the depth chart a lot, but the question, kind of should be, how often is he the wide receiver 3 out there? Because I do think that we're going to see a lot of just different packages with specific guys kind of going out as that third wide receiver. Turpin obviously comes to mind. So I do think that he will be the guy that likely gets the most snaps and targets as a wide receiver 3. But I also think that there is going to be plenty of times when we're going to see Turpin out there. We're going to see other folks kind of as that 11th guy on offense that are wide receivers that aren't necessarily Tolbert.
I'm very high on Jalen Tolbert. I thought he was always overmatched as a wide receiver 2. But as a wide receiver 3, I actually think he's really good. There was somebody on Twitter a couple days ago that put every single team's starting depth chart at receiver, and you look at all the wide receiver 3s, and it's a really brutal list. Like, there's just not a lot of depth at wide receiver 3 across the NFL. And Jalen Tolbert, believe it or not, is one of the more productive wide receiver 3s in the NFL. So I actually think he's going to do really, really well in this role. Going down a step in the depth chart is going to help him a lot. He's going to have the worst corner on him every single week. My question, Landon, I'm going to ask you this, is how is he being used? Because I actually posted a video the other day of every one of Jalen Tolbert's targets from the 2024 season. And on a lot of the receptions, he does have a couple on the outside, but it's a lot of like in-breaking stuff over the middle of the field. Can he do that enough as the Z receiver in this offense? Does he play more slot and CD's playing outside with Pickens? How do you envision the Cowboys using Tolbert?
Yeah, I mean, I think Z is probably where you're going to see him a lot, right? Because I do think you're going to see a lot of CD in the slot. We've already talked about wanting to use Pickens a lot as an X. And I think that, having him, like, you think about all the follow routes, the concepts that they run, where they have two different guys running slants or in breaking routes, one behind the other, right? Certainly, you can see Tolbert running that behind CD in situations. I just think that the thing about Tolbert that's so valuable is, it's more important about where the other two guys are lining up, right? And because that's really where the focus of the targeting is going to be. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you need a guy who can function in the role at a high level, no matter where he lines up. And so I think he definitely will see most of his time as a Z. I think he'll definitely play some X as well, because he's done that. He can do that. I wouldn't be shocked to see him every once in a while in the slot, just as a kind of a change of pace. Maybe have both of your big guys outside, and you're just using him that way. So I think that one of the more valuable things of Tolbert's game is his versatility, and that he can do a lot of different things, including blocking. So I imagine that maybe in a slightly different way, but I think that he will be moved around a lot, like CD and Pickens will be, just kind of as a opposite foil for wherever the rest of the guys are lining up.
Yeah, it was unbelievable when I went back and watched all of the receptions, that there were so many, like, between the 15 and 20 yard mark, like in the middle of the field. And he's very rarely the primary option. It was always like the second or third option. But there were a lot of times where Dak would hit him across the middle of the field for a fairly big gain. And I know he's probably not going to get the targets he got last year, because George Pickens is going to gobble all those up. Yeah. Man, I would not be surprised if he has another 550, 600 yard season and 6 or 7 touchdowns as the de facto number 3 receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and that's where his clear line of development needs to go, is he needs to be more, just a step more efficient, because you're right, he's going to get less targets. So he needs to be able to make more of those targets when he's on the field, and then continue to be the solid blocker when he's on the field and be valuable that way. And that's how he'll get a lot of these snaps when you need him, because there's definitely going to be times when you're going to rotate Pickens and CD out of the game. Absolutely. As well. You need him to be in there and obviously not perform at CeeDee Lamb's level, but they also can't miss a beat if you get a clean, open opportunity and you get the ball thrown your way.
All right, so if it's not Jalen Tolbert who's winning the wide receiver 3 job, who will it be for the Cowboys?
Yeah, if it doesn't turn out to be Tolbert, then it's something where, man, Turpin really had an incredible.
That's the name for me, right?
Camp.
It's Kavonte Turpin.
And I listen. I can see folks rolling their eyes, because this is a trope, right? Like, the punt returner guy that he got a couple snaps on offense. Oh, great. But those guys always end up being kind of disappointing in the fact that they don't have a high success rate. They can't convert a high number of their targets, because usually they can't catch the ball as well. And that's why.
That's why, Wes Welker and Julian Edelman and Antonio Brown and none of these guys ended up turning out who were returners to start their careers.
That's not what I'm saying here. You know what I'm saying, but
I will say. I mean, I'm joking, but one of the points I will say is we do have this long track record of these guys that start their careers as returners. They get to be so good at that role that teams try to figure out ways to get them on offense more. And suddenly it works. And I think Welker's a good example. Edelman, Antonio Brown was a Pro Bowl punt returner before he became a star receiver. I doubt that's going to happen with Turpin, but don't completely write it off.
Well, I mean, look, again, I feel like I say this phrase all the time. I'm not suggesting that it is going to happen, but if it was going to happen, it kind of would look like what you got out of Turpin last year. I mean, Turpin got used on offense at a much higher rate than he had in the previous years with the Cowboys. And he had a lot of success. I mean, especially as the occasional jet sweep guy. I think he was averaging 10 yards a carry. And then as a receiver, despite his diminutive size, like, he can convert targets. He can make catches in traffic at times. I saw pictures of it and videos of it. And then on top of that, I actually specifically went and saw a bunch of Turpin targets not too long ago. And his ability to break tackles, we knew that, he made people miss in space, but his ability to run through arm tackles, I think, gets forgotten in that aspect. So yeah, if you can get this guy the ball, and that's the thing, is it really is with these punt returner guys, can you be a receiver of the football? Can you get open enough for me to get you the ball, or do I have to manufacture you to open? And then even at that point, can you catch the football reliably enough for me to make you a part of the offense?
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same game parlay or watching a bet right in the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And if new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
It's been a glorious 8 seasons for Taylor Moton in Carolina. Could 2025 be his last?
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast.
Let's start off by talking about the elder statesman, the beacon of consistency. We're talking about Taylor Moton. Timo. Will this be Timo's final stand in Carolina? Going back to 2017, his rookie season, Taylor Moton has played in 129 games for the Carolina Panthers, starting 113 of those during his 8 seasons as a Panther. He had an Iron Man streak that unfortunately ended last season. He had played 120 out of 120 possible games since he had been drafted back in 2017. Was a backup his first year, but then the next couple of seasons after that, he was a starter. And if you go back to just look at all the offensive snaps that he's played, he had not missed an offensive snap in 76 straight games prior to exiting the game week 5 on the road against Chicago last year with an elbow injury, then missing the subsequent weeks with an injury as he was trying to recover there. He had played every offensive down from week 13 of the 2019 season up until that first half injury in Chicago last year. That is insane for anyone playing this game, especially, which is just a brutal game on your body, to be able to stay healthy and to play all those games and to play at a high level, which Taylor Moton has done. I understand. No, he's never been a Pro Bowl, never been an All-Pro, but he has been worthy of an extension, has been worthy of Carolina continuously trotting him out there at right tackle, especially when you consider right guard's been a question mark since he's been here at points in times. Center, Lord knows, has been a question mark at points in times. Left guard, left tackle has had issues since he's been here. But the one constant, the one position you can always rely on across the last 8 seasons here in Carolina, really the last 7, is Taylor Moton at right tackle. So no, he has not been among the best right tackles in the NFL when looking at Pro Bowls and looking at all pros, but he has been the best, most consistent offensive lineman for the Panthers the last 7 years, his last 8 years here in Carolina. He had made 104 straight starts, by the way, before he missed 3 games last season with that elbow injury, again suffered in that week 5 loss on the road in Chicago. Overall, had another solid season, 77.2 PFF grade. That was 21st among 81 offensive tackles that qualified, 79.8 pass blocking rate, 18th out of 80 tackles, and in a 66.9 run blocking grade. That was 38th out of 72 tackles last year. He gave up 1 sack, 1 in 100, and he also gave up 1 sack, 14 pressures, and was penalized once in 538 pass blocking snaps last season. And by the way, the 77.2 PFF grade was the best overall grade he's had since 2021. He's been graded as a top 25 tackle in 6 out of the last 7 years. He has been a starter. Bravo, Taylor Moton. But despite all of that, despite the Iron Man streak, being a top 25 offensive tackle, according to PFF, 6 out of the 7 years he has been a starter, Taylor Moton was not handed a contract extension this offseason. There wasn't even a contract restructure. The Panthers decided to stand pat on giving him an extension that would have cleared up significant cap space. We're talking about $13 million. Even a restructure would have opened up $12 million of cap space. They said, no, we're good. Instead, he's going to play on a $31.3 million cap hit this upcoming season, which, to put into perspective, is 11% of the salary cap here in Carolina. And yes, it is the highest cap number on the team. Typically, you're seeing guys like quarterbacks who are taking up that amount of percentage of the cap. Now, you look at guys like Patrick Mahomes, and I can pull it up right now. He's not, let's see, I don't think he's taking up that much of the cap, but he is. He's taking a ton of the cap, but those are the guys that you typically see taking up that larger percentage of the salary cap. So look at Patrick Mahomes up now. For the upcoming season 2025, 9.8% of the salary cap. That's what Patrick Mahomes is taking up for the Kansas City Chiefs. Meanwhile, here in Carolina, the right tackle, very good right tackle, mind you, is taking up 11.1%. That's just to let you understand just how significant that cap number is for Taylor Moton that the Panthers are going to have him play on. Now, here's the thing. They've had to restructure his deal pretty much every year, not pretty much, actually every year since he signed that extension during July of 2021. They did it in March 22 and 23. And in last September, they opened up cap space as well by restructuring. And I wonder how big of a concern is Timo's health to the decision-making for Dan Morgan and for Brant Tillis and the organization overall in not wanting to extend him this offseason, because he's over the hill. He's over 30, and that is when play starts to decline. We understand that Father Time is undefeated, and Taylor Moton's played a lot of games. There's been a lot of wear and tear on his body. If you look at it, last season, it seemed like they were trying to really manage him throughout the year, as apparently there's some concern about his knee and maybe even his durability moving forward as, again, he turns 31 in August. There were 7 weeks last year where he was listed as did not participate in practice on a Wednesday for rest. So 7 weeks, they had him rest on Wednesdays last season. His knee was only listed, by the way, on the injury report 3 times. And he did miss week 17 with a knee injury and then was able to play in week 18. So he missed 2 weeks because of the elbow, and then he missed 1 week because of the knee, which apparently, from my understanding, is something that they're concerned about. So because of that, if they have to continue to kind of load manage him this upcoming season, and if any way his play dips, I could see it being his last year. But if they have to continue to manage the load, which is fine at this stage of his career, like, do you need Taylor Moton to practice on Wednesdays? Do you need him? I guess you would want to be a full participant on Thursdays, but then walk through on Fridays. Does he need to necessarily be full? Could he be limited and do what he needs to do and then have him in the ice bath, whatever he's got to do to be ready to go on Sunday? Because, again, this is a physically demanding sport, the most physically demanding. Maybe not. Maybe it isn't. You can argue whatever, but certainly feels like the most physically demanding sport here in America. I feel like Taylor Moton is somebody that you want to keep around. And it's never a guarantee if you go out and get a tackle via the draft or wherever it may be that they're going to end up being as good as Taylor Moton. Because if you're trying to do anything, you want to find somebody who's going to be better than what Taylor Moton was here in Carolina. Of course, you want him to at least match what he did, which will be very difficult just based off of, again, the nature of the NFL and playing football at this level. So we'll see if this is the last year for Timo.